final segment for this month's work, the Tools for Big Gifts, leads us to the preparation of a fundraising plan. It is one thing to have an annual giving program that relies on special events and direct mail and virtually nothing else, and that's about where it's going to stay with some foundation grants unless you actually can develop a fundraising plan. So we've had some tools in the workbook to help you with this. Even if it's a gentle, brief outline, it's important to have something written down for several reasons. One, it brings your volunteers along with you so that they will see why you're doing what you're doing and some of the prep work that's required. It also helps you focus on your priorities and not get taken away from that by ideas that might come in during the year. So if you look at the appendix, you'll see a fundraising assessment. Excellent tool. Have your board members take this, or your volunteers. They'll be very surprised and you'll be very pleased that they will see the work that has to be done. And that's where you start with developing your fundraising assessment. You do your internal assessment starting with that document and the results. And you'll see in the very first part of this week's workbook that there's an outline of what you have to do the internal assessment. And then you're going to be conducting some interviews. Interviews are fantastic. They are probably the best cultivation tool you will ever have, which allows you to reach out to major donor prospects and say, I'd like to ask your candid opinions confidentially, and move ahead with that. Good question you might ask, though, is how will a major donor prospect respond to you if they are worried that you might report back to the organization that they aren't happy with things? So my advice to you would be go ahead and see if there's someone else you might hire to conduct these interviews who could provide that confidentiality that they so desperately need. So here's what you do. You go ahead and pick your best 10 to 15 prospects and you set up the appointments and you go meet with them. The interview is set up. You have an outline in your books about how to create the questions, and part of our work this week will be focusing on just those questions, and there's some excellent exercises for you to download and take a look at. But in the meantime, I'll simply say the exercises are done based on a timeless formula that was created by fundraising consulting firms that do this to this day all over the country. And it's sort of, I like to think of it as a workout. You start with questions that are very general and involve and engage the volunteer who's being asked these questions. And then it's like a workout. You start working a little faster, running a little harder. So you start asking them some questions about volunteer leadership, and ultimately at the height of the exercise, you'll be asking them about what the capability of some of the people that you would like to solicit might be. And then you cool it off with questions about public relations and marketing, and of course any other questions, any other comments they'd like to make. Once you've gathered the data, you compile an assessment. This is not something that is normally taught. It is taught to consultants as it was taught to me when I worked for a consulting firm. But it's an important empirical process for you to understand. And again, in the workbook, you'll have some good samples and downloadable exercises in the forums. But the idea is that you report factually your findings in each of the major 5 sections. Once you've done your findings, you draw your conclusions based on your experience. You conclude certain things. And then you pretty much throw away the findings and empirically move from, because I conclude this, I recommend this, and present that to your board. Let's go back to another important point about why to do a fundraising assessment. If you do one and you come up with a fundraising plan based on that, that's something you can give to your board for their approval. Trust me on this, the more your board is involved in the early stages of fundraising planning, whether it's annual giving or big gifts or capital campaigns, the more they will work for you because they've been engaged from the onset. You're not coming to them at the last minute saying, could you please help me? They actually understand the process. So good luck with the assessment, and as always, feel free to reach out to any of the faculty to ask any specific questions you might have about your organization.